So in this video, I'm going to show you how to work with gradients. Gradient is a fade from one color to another. So it's going to require more than one color to be applied. So far we've been working with flat colors, meaning it's just one solid color. One of the reasons why you would want to use a gradient is to apply shading. And so as we get more advanced, we can uh, just make things look a little bit more realistic when we start using gradients. So I'm starting with just these two squares. We're going to have this square filled with gray, and I'm going to come over into my properties panel, and you can see in your fill, if we were to just click that and open it up, we have all these solid colors to choose from, but you've probably already experimented with these at some point. There's a default gradient selected on here for us to choose, and you can see how it applies it. So again, it's a fade from, we can see it fading from white to black. So that's what a gradient is. Now, a couple ways that we can edit gradients. One, down here we can see that there's a gradient options button. And so when we click that, it's going to open up our gradient panel. You could just come straight here if you wanted to by going to Window, Gradient. Alright, I like to keep my gradient panel in here as a button. So there's three types of gradients here. We have a linear gradient, a radial gradient, and a freeform gradient. Right now we're going to focus on linear and radial, and the first being linear. So a linear goes from, one side to another in a line. And we have down here a gradient slider with two different colors on it. So if you click and hold and drag, you can see how that affects our gradient. So the more of one circle there is, the more color that there's going to be. If we wanted more black in there, we could drag the black. Now the diamond up top is basically where it meets, the two colors meet. So by default, this diamond is smack dab in the middle. If you wanted a, again, more gradual fade here, but more black, we could move that to the left. All right, now we can apply more colors by clicking right below the slider. So let's say we wanted it to go from white to black and back to white. We can do that. And then you could play around with your diamond shapes to increase it. Alright, so let's say we wanted to change the color of this. You can just double click on the circle. That's one way to do it. Go to your swatches. Okay, that's probably the easiest way to do it. You can also go to your fill, and if you had this so you could see them both, you could take a color and drag it on top of a circle. So you can have as many colors as you want in a gradient. We can also change the direction of this gradient. So see how there's an angle here? If we wanted this to go top down, we would change that to 90 degrees. If we wanted this to be angled, we could do something like 45 degrees. So this is going to be the best way to manipulate your gradient using the gradient panel. Now you can play around with, it puts this little kind of manual transform on there. I find that that's a little bit more difficult to work with because you can't be as precise, I usually find. You can try it out. I've also found that doing it that way sometimes tends to crash Illustrator. Maybe your experience will be different. So another type of gradient is a radial gradient. So we could just select that. And you can see what it does here. I'm going to just keep it simple and change it back to two colors. And you can see it starts on the inside and radiates out, around all sides. Um, Again, if we wanted to change that color, we can switch to this color picker, and let's say we wanted it to be a little darker on the inside and a little lighter on the outside. All right, so look how subtle that is. There's a gradient where it's dark on the inside, moving outside. So that's radial gradient. Okay, so now we're going to apply this in probably a more kind of realistic kind of way. I'm going to delete this one square. I'm going to take this other one and just resize it to fit our canvas. I'm going to change this back to linear gradient. We're going to give this an angle of -90. So this just means that the left side of the slider is going to be the top and the right side of the slider is going to be the bottom. And we already have our color in here that we want there. And this other color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change this to our pink. And we're going to take this other color here, just double click it to open it up, and we're going to switch it to this pink color. All right, now I'm going to add another color stop in here. These are called color stops. And I'm going to take my eyedropper, notice how it's still selected here, color picker, and I'm going to pick this color here to put it in here. I'm going to add another color stop. I check to make sure that the color picker is still there, and I'm going to select this color. All right. The other thing I want to point out is notice the location of these color stops. So sometimes if you're following a tutorial, it'll give you a specific location to put this in. In this case, I'm just going to put this roughly around 65%. And this other one, I'm going to put roughly around 30%. And there we go. There's a nice background if we wanted to turn this eventually into maybe a sky background. Okay, now we're going to switch over to our ellipse tool. I'm just going to draw a circle here, and I'm going to remove some of our color stops. So to do that, we just click and drag down, and I'm going to switch this to, oh, I don't have a white color out there. We're going to change this to white. And we're also going to change our other one to white. All right, so one of the reasons why you might want to do this is because notice there's this other option here for opacity. So another way to just blend things in to the background is by changing the opacity of one of these color stops to 0. So now we can actually see what's behind it and help it blend in to the background. From here, we're going to take it a step further. We're going to go to this effect menu. We haven't talked about effects yet. You're going to start seeing them pop up more often. There's different options in here that again will help you kind of blend things in with the background, will help you apply more complex coloring. But the one that we're going to go for, we're going to hover over this stylize option and select outer glow. And we're going to change this color to white. And if you haven't, make sure that you check that preview box and just tap the blur button a little bit, tap it up, and you can see what that does. It'll, just like the name implies, it glows on the outside. And so from here we can click OK. And there we go. There's a cool little cool like kind of moon is what I'm thinking. Alright, now we're going to add a little bit of terrain here. I'm just going to make some circles with the ellipse tool. Again, notice it saves our last gradient. So I'm going to select this color tab at the bottom here and just change that back to 100. And I'm also going to change the angle of this back to 0 so it goes left to right. And with this color, I'm going to use my eyedropper. I'm going to pick that second to top purple. I'm going to select the other color tab and pick this purple here. And now I'm just going to kind of line this up. There's no real wrong way to do this. And make a copy of this. I'm going to bring this one to the front. And that could be kind of interesting. I'll show you at the end of this how to make a mask for this. So that way we don't see the outside of these circles. We'll do that at the end. Okay, we're going to go back to our circle tool and we're going to make these kind of trees. So we're going to make a circle. We're going to start with that. And we only need 2 colors in here. Your angle, if it's not, you're going to want that to be -90. Then we're going to use our color picker to change this color, and we're going to choose this purple here for that one, and for this other color we're going to choose that purple. And so that's going to give us the top of the tree. I'm going to switch to my rectangle, and I'm just going to do this off to the side. And then I'm going to take my direct selection tool and just move these in a little bit. We'll bring this circle to the front. I'm also going to replace this with just a solid color. And you can play around with the proportions a little bit. Once you like it, you can group it. And maybe just for sake of practice, just make a copy of that. So I'm just going to resize the top of this tree to make it a little bit more proportional because that's really bothering me. Okay, so I'm going to group it again and make another copy of it. So one of the things we're going to start looking at and getting into moving forward for the remainder of the year is we want to pay attention to shadows and where the light source is. So we can take this shape, we're going to use our Pathfinder tool and just unite it so that way Illustrator reads it as one shape. We're going to just give this a black color, and we can rotate this and we can begin to kind of skew it. And so simply put, there's a formula to making shadows. So we start by creating a shape, we fill it with black, and then the next and final thing that we could do here is lower the opacity of this. So we could just change this to something like maybe 15%, and it's just kind of trial and error. Notice how some of this shadow is kind of overlapping. We can just manipulate those using our direct selection tool. And if this carries off the page, that's totally fine. Shadows tend to be skewed. And you can play around with different opacities. And then we can do the same thing over here. Create our shape, fill it with black, change the opacity to something like 15 or 20. It's just trial and error. Okay, so now the last thing I guess for this project, I just want to make a layer mask around here. So a mask is just like a window frame. So I'm going to select this background layer. I'm going to do Command C to copy it, Command F to paste in front, and then we can right click, arrange, and bring that to the very front. So there's this shape here. We're going to remove all color from it, fill color and stroke color. So there's just this invisible frame over on top of everything. I can select everything that we want in here and just right click and make clipping mask. And now we have like a kind of it creates a window into our artwork and hides everything on the outside. So there you go. Try this out. Again, we're just practicing, just trying to have some fun. I'm trying to show you some different ways that we can use our coloring. Okay, the big thing to take away from this is the gradient panel. You should know how to work with that. Start to familiarize yourself with the effect panel and some of the stuff in there, and start to familiarize yourself with making shadows. When you're done, you just need to take a screenshot of this, upload it to Canvas. You could also just upload the file if that's easier, whatever easiest for you. Um, and as long as I see some gradients and some resemblance to what we put together right now, that's all I'm looking for.